Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Brad, and I'm one of the pastors here at Copper Hills. And if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I'll be in the plaza right out here, and I sure would like that opportunity to say hi to you. So we had like an amazing day here on our campus yesterday. It's our annual 4-Peak challenge that we do. And I have the privilege of being at the finish line when everybody comes across the finish line, and I get to hear from them just the impression that our volunteers on the hills and around the campus leave with them. Do you know that we have 160 people that are foot washing servants for the day, and think of ways, whatever it could be, to serve the people from our community that are on the hills. And for those of you that volunteered, thank you so much. Jesus would say that himself, he already has, but I want to say it too. What an amazing day. By the way, we have already had 3 hikers sign up for next year. That's cool. So we did something a little different this year. We invested pretty heavily in a pretty cool medal that we gave to everybody. Each one of these pieces, I don't know if you can see it, is a brass shape of a mountain that they picked up after they finished one of the 4 mountains, and then they came to the finish line, and if they had, whatever mountains they'd climbed, they would put in here and we would present this to them. But here's what we decided to do was, as we presented it to them, we said we want to pray a blessing over each person that crossed the finish line. Now, they didn't know we were doing that. It wasn't like an audible thing. But it was, as we put the medal over their heads, it was, Jesus, would you bless this person? May they know you and see you and experience your love. So yesterday, over 500, 560, 70, 80, whatever it was, people were prayed for individually in Jesus' name. I think that's significant. That is not just an academic thing, or it's not even a cool thing to do. I think it's invoking the name of our Savior in ways that are profound, that we'll never measure, we may never see, but he's a blessing kind of God. And I think that was something from him for the people that were there. So thanks for participating. What a wonderful day it was. So we're in the last weekend of this series we've been talking together about called The Way for almost 10 weeks now. I think it is something like that. So for one more time, last time, thank goodness, because you've said this every time, Brad, like we get it already, but just in case, when Jesus entered this world as a human to live among humans, he came with an invitation to people in the first century that lingers today. It's still the same invitation. And contrary to what we often think, or you might even have been taught in your church experience, Jesus did not come to teach us a new doctrine and get us to adhere to it. He was not coming with a new moral code and inviting us to align ourselves with that kind of morality. He did not come even to invite us to become Christians, punch our ticket for heaven, and get there when we die. Now, all of those in some way are part of the outside edge, if you will, of the invitation. But this is what his invitation was. He said, would you be willing to come to me and be my apprentice for the rest of your life? Yes, there is a spiritual transformation that is part of it. You can't be that follower without that transformation. And this is what Jesus brought by his death and resurrection and empowerment of his Spirit inside of our lives. But the invitation was to follow him, be his student, his apprentice, his learner throughout our lives. He would have used the word talmidim, and that's the word that we have thought about together. And once again, when Jesus was thinking about what that meant, this is what he was thinking. These kind of 3 areas that if you said yes to Jesus the rabbi, that meant that you were with him all the time. You moved in with him, and you went to the market with him, and you did all of life with him all the time. You were just together all the time. And as that happened over the course of years, you would begin to think like him, not just try to do what he did, but you'd actually think like him, which would affect your actions, and you might even be mistaken for him. And this is still the invitation that's there for us, to figure out ways by his Spirit to do every moment of life with him, consciously aware, whether we're having lunch together or making huge decisions or dealing with our sinfulness and waywardness, whatever it is, every moment to do with him. And then string one year after the other with him. And watch how that shifts our thinking, our worldview, how we deal with struggles and difficulties and victories, how we do all of life. And then some more years get strung together. And lo and behold, we start to naturally and easily do the things that he did. And this is his invitation to us. What a wonderful invitation. This is actually how it happened for first of the five of the first of his early followers. In Matthew 4, we read this: "One day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them," here it is, "Come, follow me, and I'll show you how to fish for people." A couple of verses later, Matthew 4:21, a little further up the shore, he saw two other brothers, James and John, sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee, repairing the nets, and he called to them to come too. A couple of chapters later, a guy by the name of Matthew, Jesus says, as Jesus was walking along, now there, hold on just a second. That's the second time he's just been walking along. There's a little bit of a clue here in that one. We'll get to that. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. Here it is, "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. And what he meant was those same three things to them that he means for us. Now, stop for just a second. Don't you wish sometimes that when you read the stories of these accounts that people have with Jesus, that you didn't know how it ended? I mean, we would find out how it ended, but we read this and immediately we go to the conclusion. We know how it all turned out. And it softens the intrigue. It's not near as mysterious, but what? For just like this morning, let's imagine we don't know what they say to Jesus' invitation to follow. What do you think the conversations might have been like in real time? Maybe Peter and James and John looking at each other and go, is he serious? Like, doesn't he remember we failed out of rabbi school when we were kids? We never made it past elementary grade. Like, he wants us to be his Talmudim. Is he expecting us to sell the fishing business? Like, what's he thinking here? Is this like a full-time thing, or is this like part-time work that we do? Like, just what will Dad say if we go to him and say, "Guess what? We're out of the fishing business, Dad. It's back on your shoulders." How's that going to work in the family? Or Matthew, for example, going, "Okay, just a second. Come follow you. I'm doing pretty good in the taxation enterprise here. It's making some money. I kind of like what's happening. I like the independence. I get to do my own thing." Oh, it's probably just a metaphor, right? It's just kind of like, as you continue your taxation business, kind of keep me in mind along the way. Or is he actually thinking, I'm going to sell out? Like, get rid of the revenue source from my life and actually be with him all the time? Like, can you imagine those conversations? Can you imagine what that was like for them to consider what it was that was put in front of them? You kind of get the idea. It was an actual decision that had to be made whether or not they were going to be followers or apprentices of Jesus. It wasn't like Jesus kind of threw it out there and went on. No, it was a direct invitation to do something different than what they had done up to that point in their lives. It was a shift for them. Now, these aren't the only people that get invited to this. And here's a few examples. Luke tells us another example is they were walking along. There it is again. Someone said to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." This person's really got it, right? But Jesus replied, you got to understand something. If you don't get what you're into here, that's an easy choice. So you need to know that foxes have dens to live in and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head. In other words, if you say yes to this, we're going to be living in hostels and we're going to be camping out on the beach and under the stars. Like, if you're in for that, consider that as part of the decision. He said to another person, "Come, follow me." There it is again. The man agreed. But he said, "Hold on just a second. Lord, first let me return home and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Your duty is to go and preach about the kingdom of God." Like, that is a heartless response. Well, maybe not. See, it doesn't say you can't go home and bury Dad. He probably did do that. What he was saying is there's something on the line here. This is a costly choice. There's some payment There's something you're going to have to do in this decision. Verse 61 goes on, another said, yes, Lord, I will follow you, but first let me say goodbye to my family. Seems like a reasonable request, doesn't it? Going to be on the road with this guy for I don't know how long. Just can we at least say goodbye? But Jesus told him, anyone who puts a hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. My goodness, Jesus. What it doesn't say is that he told the guy he couldn't go home and say goodbye, but it's about a bigger question that Jesus is saying. There's a decision. You can't become a follower and stumble into it. You might stumble into being a self-identified Christian just by virtue of attending, just by growing up in a Christian home or thinking you grew up in a Christian nation. You can stumble into that one, but you cannot stumble. It just didn't happen by accident that you become a follower, a student, an apprentice of Jesus. Demanding, I suppose on one hand, unless this is the gateway to the most vital, vibrant, dynamic life, and it's a life you're designed to live, then it isn't harsh at all. Then it's just being truthful and helpful. So again, we don't know, right? We don't know how these guys answered. What did they say? Did they go, yep, we're in. We're all in. This is a great deal. What a great opportunity. We're in. Or did they go like some of these guys, okay, Jesus, we're kind of in, but could we do this like for a couple of weeks of vacation this summer, right? I want to keep doing what I'm doing, so you bet I'm in for a couple of weeks. Or was it, I'm going to need a little bit of time to liquidate some stuff, sort a few things up. I kind of have to set myself up for retirement, Jesus, because I don't know how this whole thing's going to work out with you, so it's just not the right time right now. If you give me a couple of years, I think I'll be ready at that point. Kids will be a little older, be settled, some stuff will be kind of put in place in my life. So can we check back in a couple? How did they answer? Here's the problem. We know how they answered. But imagine for just a second, you didn't know what they said to this, and this is a huge decision of what they're going to do. It will be almost unbelievable for us to think of how they responded if we don't know how they responded. This is how they respond. In Luke 5, it says they, that's Simon, James, and John, left everything and followed Jesus. Luke 5, a little later, Matthew got up, left everything, and followed him. What? Like, really? They sold out? They got rid of the fishing business? Did they do that like right then and there? Did Matthew just leave his tax collector table and leave all the cash and just walk away? We have no idea whether it was later that day or later the week or a couple of months. I don't know. It doesn't matter in one sense. The point is that a decision was made, a die had been cast, and what remained now was simply to let that unfold of how that would be. So here's the sobering thing. Maybe even a bit unnerving, possibly frustrating. The invitation that Jesus offers has been unchanged for 2,000 years. He still offers, come with me, make the choice. There is a decision to be made. You can't stumble into this one. You have to choose. There's going to be some realignment that's necessary. There's going to be some adaptation that's going to have. It's going to switch your life up. That's how significant stepping into being a follower of his is. So now hold on just a second. Stop, the text to your boss right now, resigning from your job tomorrow morning, okay? Like, don't do that. Don't, plan now how you're going to liquidate your home and you're going to live in kind of an impoverished setting. You're going to choose to live downtown under a bridge so that you can care for those that are homeless and destitute. That actually is not what Jesus' invitation is. You might be afraid that's what the invitation is. Now, the decision has some implications that could be pretty radical. Sure, I guess that's the case. But that kind of request from Jesus as part of deciding to follow is actually not the norm. It isn't. It does happen, but it's not the norm. What he does ask all of us is to give serious thought to what it means to personally move from being someone who casually identifies as a Christian to someone who is engaged in an all-out student perspective, humble approach as a learner and apprentice of Jesus, so that we would spend every moment aware of his presence, living in his presence, shaping our thinking, being formed into people who are just mistaken for him because we take a lifelong student-apprentice walk with him. You see, the great danger of seeing Jesus' invitation as a ticket to heaven when I die, or a moral code to follow, or a doctrine to embrace, or worse, and this is a worst case scenario, as an optional add-on for the uber devoted, is not so much that we'll become people driven by our own desires and dreams. The great danger is that we will settle for a mediocre version of life that we're actually designed for. So the last several weeks, we've been looking at how Jesus gave us the way to live a life of a student and an apprentice of his. And he offers to change us into those kinds of people if we'll make that choice for him. To transform us is actually the term that he uses. People who routinely live their lives as if Jesus was living his life through them. But we also looked at some of the pressures that come our way. The environments that we live in and the culture that we're in, it puts pressure on us. Our background, our experiences, habits, those kinds of things that put pressure on us. Well, this morning, I want to give you one more threat to choosing to be an apprentice and this rich life that Jesus gives you. And I want to do that by looking at a quote from Jesus that speaks directly to this threat. Interestingly enough, it's a quote that starts with "come to me" once again, just like his friends early on experienced. So let me give you a little context before I read the quote. The quote comes on the heels of a day that was a really difficult day for Jesus. He had just had a couple of John the Baptizer's friends come to him. John was the forerunner to Jesus, and they come representing John, and they ask Jesus, "John's not sure you're the real Messiah." Like, that's got to sting a bit, doesn't it? The guy that went ahead of you and told the nation that the Messiah was coming and then identified Jesus, that this is who he was, the Messiah, now has doubts about Jesus. It's on the heels of his own hometown, the region where he grew up, coming to him and going, in spite of all those cool miracles that you did, we're just not convinced you're the Messiah. You're one of us, you're one of the people in the hood, but we don't know that you're legit. And Jesus gets this information. What does that do to someone? That Jesus was invincible to that? It didn't affect him? No, I think it affected him. And so it's on the heels of that difficult environment that he writes this in Matthew 28. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and you carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give is light." So I said there was a threat in there to choosing to become an apprentice. What is that? Well, frankly, on the surface, it can appear that weariness and heavy burdenness is the challenge, is the danger, that we'll experience that, and that will prevent us from choosing to be an apprentice or a follower. That's actually not the case, because whether you're a follower or you're not a follower, weariness is part of the journey, and carrying heavy loads and burdens is just part of it. You are not shielded from those when you say yes to being Jesus' apprentice. In fact, in some ways, it can get amped up when you do that. So that is not the case. So what is this weariness and these burdens? What are they? It's interesting word usage here. Weariness is what a whole bunch of people felt yesterday as they crossed the line. Just weariness from running walking too many miles, too many mountains. They're weary. They're just physically tired from exertion. That's what this kind of weariness is. Burden bearing, you know what it is? It's not chaos and catastrophe in life. That's not the word usage here. The word usage is just too much responsibility for too long. Just the weight of life. So there's weariness and there's burden bearing. And Jesus would say, that's actually not the threat. The threat is that while you inevitably carry burdens and you get weary from time to time, the real threat is that you'll be restless in that. Now that's a lack of rest. That's not a lack of sleep, but that's a deep soul rest, a contentment, a peace, a shalom in the soul and the mind of where you are. In the middle of the burden carrying, all the responsibility and the breakneck pace in one sense that we run at. The busyness, the rushing, even the chaos and panic at times of trying to keep ahead and handle it all and be on top of it all and keep the plate spinning and the balls in the air and try to meet way too many demands from way too many people around us. And Jesus would say that's the threat, that you won't be restful in those times. There won't be peace, there won't be shalom in your heart when that happens. And he says the answer is something called an easy yoke. Given the context into which Matthew writes this, I wonder if Jesus wasn't speaking from his own experience in that moment, going, I get weariness, I get responsibility. And what I do when that comes into my world, I go to my Father. You see him do it over and over and over and over again, is what he does, is something about this easy yoke that he speaks about in his own heart and life. So could it be that hidden in this quote from Jesus that he's giving us is a secret to successfully dealing with the pace that comes from trying to self-repair weariness and burden carrying, and that there actually is a solution in here from Jesus? See, if you read it at face value, especially if you are weary and feeling burdened, it might sound like Jesus is actually piling on right here. You could read it that way. After all, a yoke is an instrument of work, isn't it? Like heavy pulling work, hard work. So you could think that this is exactly the opposite of what tired workers need. The need is really a day off or a vacation in Cabo, or a day at the spa that comes with deep muscle massages, or maybe just a mattress or a cot. For sure, I don't need a yoke. Don't need that. But maybe this is the mystery. Maybe this is what Jesus is offering, and it's much better than a mattress vacation or a spa day. Maybe he knows that is the most restful thing that he could possibly give us would be a new way of living as an apprentice of his through weariness and with the heavy burdens there. We can, after all, not get away from them. Maybe this is what the easy yoke is. Maybe Jesus is offering essential equipment in this yoke. So let's look at a yoke for just a second, real quickly. It's not a word that we think of very often here. It's a first century kind of thought. We're not an agrarian culture, but we kind of get a picture. This is what a yoke looks like. Piece of wood that straps a couple of oxen together. This is how it's used right here. Now, what's interesting is it could be oxen or it could be cows or donkeys, whatever it would be. In this case, there's a couple of oxen, and they're tied together by this yoke with a central pull point where they're going to pull stuff. Whether it's pulling a plow or pulling a wagon, whatever it would be, it's what the farmer uses to move heavy objects down the way. But here's the interesting thing that I discovered. There's always an alpha ox. Somebody who is kind of setting the pace, the stronger of the two, the more experienced of the two, the wiser, if you will. And guess what? That younger, less alpha ox has to actually go the pace of the alpha ox. You can't go faster because he pulls the load his pace. And guess what? He pulls more of the load. It's more weighted on him. How much depends on how strong the alpha ox is. And what Jesus maybe is saying is, I'm the Alpha Messiah. I'm the one that invites you to come alongside, but you choose to get into the yoke with me. I carry by far the greatest weight here, by far, maybe 99% of it. But if you won't come in beside me, you'll never experience the weight of that. But you got to choose. I'm not forcing you into that. You choose whether you want to be a follower with me. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do life at my pace. You won't go faster than me because you'll just chafe at the yoke. You'll go at my pace, and you'll go where I lead. But I'll be with you, and I'm stronger than you, and I'm more capable than you, I'm smarter than you, I'm more of an alpha than you. I got you. But you choose whether you want to come in beside me. And we're still going to pull the burden behind us. We're still going to carry that because that's why we're paired together. To do this together, the load and the weight won't go off. We'll just do it together, and I'll be the stronger of the two. And that is maybe the mystery of carrying burdens and dealing with weariness. But here's the thing. There is an epidemic spiritual health crisis that is a silent and deadly killer that creates a exacerbated weariness and a multiplied heavy burdenness. And it severely undermines our ability to increasingly live with Jesus and actually get into the yoke with him. It actually has a clinical name. It's what psychologists would call hurry sickness or hurry addiction. What is that? Well, here's a definition for hurry addiction. It is a continuous compulsive struggle and relentless attempt to accomplish or achieve more and more things or participate in more and more events in less and less time. Anybody there? It gives me actually a short-term satisfaction that I crave and a long-term corrosive outcome that I don't want. Hurry addiction results in folks thinking fast, talking fast, acting fast, multitasking, rushing against the clock, feeling pressured to get things done, and of course, frustrated when it doesn't all come together the way that it should. I've been spending some time with friends the last few weeks that I've really grown to admire and love in just a new way. And they're all share one thing in common. They're all recovering from one addiction or another. And they talk openly about their addictions and their weaknesses, which is so refreshing to hear. They're recovering, but nonetheless still addicts. And yet there's no pretense and pretending and posturing and minimizing the pain, nor is there glorifying what they've done or war storytelling. It's just humble admission of who they are. It's so refreshing. A few weeks ago, I sat around a conference table with, after meeting some of these guys for the very first time. There was 10 or so of us around the table. And just as a way to get to know one another a little bit, I said, just give me a 1-minute synopsis of your life. We're just meeting for the first time. And every one of them told a story of addiction to, heroin or alcohol or cocaine or pornography or whatever it was in their case. And then I was asked for my story because they don't know me. Right? They don't know my story. So I fumbled around a little bit, wasn't sure exactly what to say, and I looked down and I said, well, okay, like when I was like a little kid, I took some leaves and I rolled it up in newspaper and I smoked it. And then I remember as a senior in high school, I once took a sip of a beer and I didn't tell my dad. Right? The truth of the matter is, as I thought about it a little bit more, lies don't work in that group of people who don't lie and disclose. And I would say that I have an addiction. I'm a recovering speed addict. Not the drug. But I have had this thing going on in my world and my life where I've taken great pride in working harder, working longer, applying myself to the skills needed more diligently than I thought anyone. I remember telling an employee some years ago when I first hired him, like, you make mistakes, right? I said, I want you to know something. You will never work harder than I do. How's that for your first day? Set you up for success? And then about 10 years ago, 8 or 9 anyways, at a place of some personal weariness and burden bearing, like responsibility and just tired, I opened up my Bible one day and this is what I read. Come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy burdened. And for the first time in my life, I read the word rest in a way I hadn't heard before. And something just blurted out inside of me. I said, oh God, how I want that rest. I don't want to be the lazy guy. I don't want to not do anything. I'm still active. I got energy. I got dreams. I got hopes. But I'm dying. The work of God is killing me. And I want the work of God to restore me. And I need rest. And it would be this one verse that would reshape my world. And so I changed some things. I stopped getting up to an alarm clock early in the morning. And I said, Jesus, I'm going to go to bed a little earlier and I'm going to sleep till you wake me up. And for the last 8 years, unless I'm catching a plane, okay, or something, that's how we've done it. I decided to actually take a Sabbath, to actually sit down and think, what would a Sabbath be? Well, it's not Sunday for me because, we're together, right? But there's another day. And it's hard sometimes. There's pressure, there's phone calls and there's texts, and I'm a pastor. I want to respond right away. And yet, my soul needs a Sabbath. Jesus took that. I need to carve out on my schedule, actually put it on my schedule. Jesus, you and I are going to take an hour together here, or we're going to go hike together for the morning. I can't do it without that. And this is what Jesus, I think, is pointing to when he says, come to me. Come beside me as the alpha ox. You're just a pipsqueak. You're just a little guy. So I got the load. But we can't do this if we don't do it together, and it's your choice not whether you want to become a redeemed, forgiven Christian in that way, but whether you want to follow me. Those are different. I think if you're like me, maybe evaluating some of the symptoms of what this hurry addiction would look like might be helpful. So here are some. One, if you have it, you never have enough time to meet all the demands on you. You feel angry and frustrated by delays, however unavoidable. There are attempts to do everything way too quickly. There's difficulty winding down once you arrive home. There's an inability to relax even on holidays. Like, what's your plan for Thanksgiving? You could even plan it out. There's a lack of patience with people who are slower paced than yourself. They're lazy. You leave things to the last minute, and then you need a deadline high just to motivate you. Are those your symptoms? When you pull up to a stoplight and there's 3 lanes of traffic, do you find yourself looking for the shortest lane? And not only that, evaluating the model, the make, and year of the car and the age of the person driving. So you make sure you get in that lane so you're off the block before anyone else. When you're shopping and you're about to check out, do you check the length of the checkout lines? And not just check to see which is like the longest, how many people are huddled around each cart, because the more people there are, the fewer carts there are. And then you count how many items are in each cart times the number of carts in the line, and you go, that's the shorter line, I'm going to get in that one. And you go, and then actually if you're in an advanced case of this, somebody who was ahead of you in the line beside you, but you get through before it's like winning the Super Bowl for you. It's like a big deal, right? Yeah. And then the crazy part is there's a category of people who have this who are a little bit like myself, that they take pride in it. And they're the person that'll remind you regularly that works 60, 70, 80 plus hours a week, and they haven't had lunch all week long, and it's been 23 years since they had a day off. And somehow that's a good thing. And it's not a good thing. And we just can't live. We can't live the apprentice life at that pace. You know, it's not about not being busy. It's not about not having a full slate of things and people to see and stuff. That's not what we're talking about. It's how you do it. Do you know that the pace of our life reveals the peace in our heart? You can have lots of peace and go hard and go fast. That's not what this is about. It's not taking the burdens away and the weariness out of the equation. It's in that moment. Who do I rely on? Is the solution and the outcomes just up to me? Or do I actually have the alpha ox with me? Where I don't have to do all the things that I set out. I don't have to make the results happen. I don't have to be the winner. I don't have to be right. I don't have to be first. So that's a different kind of peace that really dictates the pace. I think Jesus understood this. I think he had experience with it. I believe that's why you see him check out and celebrate a Sabbath. I think that's why you see him spend time alone with his Father. I think that's why when he sends his group out for a clinical experience in the marketplace to see what this is all about, they come back, and the first thing he does with them is he takes them off on a retreat to be quiet and restful and recover. There's a rhythm to this that Jesus employs. So how would you start? Well, real practically, quickly. Would you reconsider what a Sabbath means to you? It doesn't mean sitting in your closet going, doesn't. It's a day of rest, and you plan for rest. You do things that are refreshing. You put your phone away. You don't go to your computer. You think of things you can do with your kids or your spouse or your friends that aren't high paced. They're just, you go for a walk. You go for a hike. You bring the pace down. And it recovers the soul. You take time for a private conversation with Jesus. You schedule it. You make it part. You live simpler. Try to find ways. You slow down. You drive the speed limit. Give that a whirl. Right? Come to a full stop at a stop sign. Might help. Get into the slowest lane and the longest checkout line. Get to an appointment 10 minutes early rather than 1 minute late. And don't look at your phone. Just sit there and breathe. Walk slower. Take a nap. Try single tasking. That's the opposite of multitasking. Yeah. Read. Stare at the stars. Chew slower. Here's the thing. We're smart people. The problem will not be figuring out how. The problem will be actually doing it. Actually deciding, I intend that I am going to live my life, Jesus, beside you in that easy yoke. Let you carry the outcomes. Let you do this. And I'll walk at your pace. And you'll teach me how you do what you do. And I'll be different because of it. It's a choice. Jesus is walking along. What was his pace? Or was it a little more like this? Guys, I want to talk to you about something. I see you're fishing and I see you're collecting taxes, and I'd really like for you. I'd love for you to live the whole rich, wonderful life that I came into this world to give. And so I'm inviting you into the kind of life that when you really get it, you're going to look back and you're going to think it's the greatest treasure you've ever gotten in your life. You're going to be like a farmer who finds a treasure in the field, sells everything he has to get that treasure, like a pearl merchant who discovers the pearl of a lifetime. And you'll get rid of everything just to have that pearl. That's the kind of life I'm talking about. So, guys, would you come? And would you be my follower? Would you be my student, my apprentice? Will you walk alongside me and we'll figure out what that looks like? You'll say no to some things. Your why will become clear for you. But let's go do this life together. Come, follow me and be my Talmudim. I want to encourage you as strongly as I can, as passionately as I can, that you would give serious and careful consideration to that. And your staff would like to help you with that in some way if we can. And so Trev, Butch, and myself have agreed that tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday, if you want to talk with someone about what would following Jesus look like in my context, we're going to be in the coffee shop. There's 3 shifts. You could come visit if you want. You don't have to, but if it would be helpful, come see us. One of us will be there from 6 to 7 in the morning, those 3 days. Another one of us will be there from 12 to 1, those 3 days. And another one of us will be there from 6 to 7. We just want to humbly serve you. If this would be helpful to you, we don't have the answers. We're fellow followers with you. But if we can help and encourage and help you solidify that decision, we would sure like to do that. So it's an offer. Do as you wish with that. Now I invite you to pray with me. Jesus, as we wrap up this series of thinking together about the way of your way, you leave the choice with us. Again, would we want to be followers of yours and be led by you into the greatest life and the greatest kingdom? And I think universally we would say, yep. And then it's a choice to get up from the tax collector's table, to get up from the boat, to do what needs to be done, to think carefully, and to take a step in your direction. Jesus, the truth is, you know our souls. Some of us, we've never actually said yes to receive your mercy and your grace and your forgiveness for walking away from you. And that would be a starting point for us to just look to you and go, okay, I'm done with independent living. I'm done doing this on my own without you. Now come. Grant me the grace and forgiveness you've offered. I receive it. Make me a new person. Transform me. And then I'm going to walk with you and be your apprentice. And some of us have self-identified as a Christian for a long time, and it's just been a title. It's been something we didn't even know exactly what we were calling ourselves. And we've never, ever just thought about being your student, resting in that, and learning from you. So Jesus, make us like yourself, however long it takes, for the rest of our lives. Better is the life as a follower than any other life. Amen.